Hello and welcome, everyone. Please give us about 1 minute. We'll get started and let people file in. Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's Higher Education Demands Trends webinar. Today, you're going to see updated alumni insights that follow real career paths from graduation through late careers, along with the latest enrollment trends, job postings, activity, and search interests for programs that are gaining traction. Our speaker today is Bob Atkins, CEO and founder of Grade DI, and he's going to be walking you through the data and connecting it to program evaluations and academic planning. Today's session is being recorded and all registrants will receive the recording and slides. If you have questions, please enter them in the Q&A box and we will answer as many as we can. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Bob.
Hi, and I apologize to our Firefly person. We don't allow any recordings like that. We don't know where those things go in the end, so we just we knock them out. If you do want a recording, we have it on the site. You're welcome to come and download it. That's not a problem at all. And you're also welcome to share it with whoever you want. So let me see. Here we are. Demand for higher education programs. We're going to get underway with our monthly edition. This is the November edition. We'll be covering data from October. And I'll be walking through a few things. First, just a brief overview of our core business, which is program evaluation and what that means. We've assembled all this data in support of program evaluation. So that's how the two are tied together. Then we'll go through one of the categories in that, which is student demand. We'll cover employment. We'll talk about one particular program, business. And then I'll talk you through some AI stuff that's going on out there that I think will be of interest to all of you, and we'll summarize. I mentioned we talk about a program evaluation system, and this is our core business, and our book was about it. We believe that there are a few components to this. First is data. You need to understand your mission. You need hard data on academic performance of each program. Are people graduating? Are they successfully passing external exams like the NCLEX? You need to understand your margins. So if you know if the programs are covering their costs or if they need to be subsidized by other programs. And by the way, those subsidies are fine in higher ed if they're needed, as long as the program is well aligned with your mission. And finally, markets. And we'll spend our day today looking at markets data. And that is, do students want that? Want the program? Do they find jobs after graduation? Are they paid well after graduation? How intense is the competition? And is this the appropriate degree level for that program, what we call degree fit? And importantly, really markets drive margins. So those two very much go together in support of your mission or not, if they're not aligned with the mission. Then, now that we have data, we actually have to do some work in order to make good program decisions. So you can't run a computer algorithm. Even we wouldn't run a computer algorithm and tell you what to do. You've got to get the right people together, engage them in a dialogue, give them the information, give them time and space to evaluate it. We like to do that in workshops where they can discuss those ideas with each other and review the data and reach preliminary decisions there. And that gives you a set of programs that are evaluated for what we call stop, start, or grow. And typically that's going to get done every couple of years, maybe every 3 years. In between, you have to manage your portfolio. And again, this data comes into play. We would recommend you look at all your programs about once a year. And that sounds onerous. And it would be if you didn't have the data automated. But once you automate the data, you collect it in an organized way. You can do that fairly efficiently. Not all the metrics change every year. So you're really looking at things that are more volatile, like student demand and employment statistics, to see if you need to make adjustments in every year to things like how many sections you're going to run of a given program. If demand is trending up, obviously you might need to address that. And this would give you a way of understanding that and making sure your capacity is aligned with what the market is demanding of you. Now, let's take a look at some of those demand indicators. I'm going to start with Google. And as you all know, there's a big issue with Google right now and all the search engines because the search is moving from the traditional search that we're all used to AI-based searches. So I think what we're seeing here in part is an outcome of that. So if we look backwards at 2023, those are the dark bars, and 2024 is the mid blue bars, and 2025 is the light blue bar. You'll notice that light blue bar is way off, and it was down last month, though not as much. And I think we're going to continue to see a decline in searches in this traditional search venue for higher education. I wouldn't overread into that indicates a decline in interest in higher education. I suspect that's not the case. Now we just have to figure out how to get the data on the AI-based searches to augment our data set here. So this should stabilize probably at a lower level over time. And as I say, I'd just be a little careful with this data for right now. It is probably not an indication of a rapid drop-off in demand for higher ed. And in fact, as I'll talk about later, I think the underlying indicators are that the number of people who enroll in college is going to go up here for a while, not down. So what did people search for? And here the numbers are more useful in a sense because they're all relative. So there's no reason to believe that the AI search volume is particularly high or low for any given program. Think of this then as more of an index to show you what is larger and smaller, not the absolute number here and or overall size of demand at this point. We're gonna have to wait a little bit to see what this stabilizes out to understand that. But in any case, the big ones are registered, our healthcare, 4 of them, registered nursing, nursing assistant, licensed practical nurse, and EMT paramedic. Then we have a couple of CTE, career and technical education programs at CTE, cosmetology and commercial truck and bus driver. And then we have an assortment of other programs, economics, and here we include econometrics because many schools have combined these in their or are filing, changed the classification, their economics programs so that they qualify as STEM programs. So it's no longer really meaningful to distinguish these two. So we have combined them. And you can see very strong demand, oddly enough, I think, for economics. Business administration and management, also strong with over 400,000 searches. Computer science and public administration, both over 300,000. We do have these 2 CTEs, and don't forget commercial truck and bus driver. For those of you who don't have that program in community college, it's actually kind of a great program. You can run it with nothing more than a parking lot and a rented truck, and it's a great way for people to get back into the workforce. So what's growing? Again, we see economics at the top of the list, very unusual. Then we see some career and technical education programs, 3D modeling and design tech, sterile processing tech, culinary arts, and electric power and transmission installers. So it is fun to see a national trend show up in our data. As all of you know, AI is driving demand for data centers, and those data centers in turn are driving demand for electricity. And that in turn is driving jobs for folks who know how to install power transmission equipment. So some 20,000 additional folks registered for that or searched for that particular program. Let's see what else have we got here. That's the main parts. Oh, I'm sorry. AI is doing well with 19,000 searches. I mentioned economics on the earlier page. We have fashion design, American Sign Language, pharmacology, and I'm coming last to religion because I find this one very intriguing. This is cropped up on our most popular programs from time to time. It was a steady one in the top 10 3 or 4 years ago, and I think what we're seeing when I see this pick up is interest not so much in religion per se, or I would abstract it above that. I think it's people trying to figure out what the meaning of all of life is, if you will. In a time when it's turbulent and divisive, they're trying to look to another spot for meaning. Many of you may have seen that there's a surge in interest in fundamental Christianity among young males, for example. So I think this is part of a broader trend, if you will. It's very much not about becoming a priest or about jobs. It's about trying to find out what's understand the world. So let's take a look at student demand and enrollment in particular. It's a very unique data set. It comes from the National Center for Education Statistics. We do some cleanup and massaging to make sure that the data is internally consistent and such. That allowed us to dodge a bullet when the NCS data was misreported by them. Our actual data set was okay. So we understood that demand did not, in fact, decline during that brief period, and they had a month or two where they made a mistake. Over the last 5 years, the demand for higher ed is really flat, down slightly, 0.3% over that period. However, masks, a fairly rapid decline during COVID, 2021, 22, and then a bounce back pretty strongly in 21 to 22, to 23, then again up in 24, and that growth is slowing a bit now at 3%. What particular programs are growing? Well, as always, we see healthcare. We've got a couple here: nursing assistant, EMT paramedic. But I think it's interesting. This is actually a pretty low number of entries in the top 10 for healthcare. We'll often see 4 or 5 there, and we only have 2. General studies saw very substantial growth over this period. That's typically going to be people in community college who are planning on going to a 4-year college and taking care of their general education credits in community colleges. So most of these are going to be at the 2-year level. I'm sorry, these are all certificates, so I should be careful. We've got certificates in CTE programs for electrician, welding tech, HVAC, and auto tech. The cert in business, a couple of those, general studies. These are other general studies in business. And finally, I mentioned healthcare, and we have a couple of tech here, IT and cybersecurity certificates. At the associate level, the picture is a bit different. As I mentioned and expected, when you look at the associate level, the growth tends to be led by healthcare. And indeed, healthcare are 3 of the top 10 programs, and the number 1 program, allied health, almost double the next nearest entrant in terms of unit growth. We also have rad tech and ultrasound tech. In terms of CTE programs, you can see HVAC here, that's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, as well as welding tech and auto tech making our top 10. And then we have a couple of pure technology programs, cybersecurity and computer science, that make our list as well. And then we have our usual random entries, other visual and performing arts, and history general. And I always cheer when history makes the list. That's my major, albeit at the bachelor's level. And it's great to see that people are still interested in that, and that, in fact, the demand for history is growing. Again, we live in very uncertain times. It's worthwhile often to be able to look back and appreciate that this is not the first time the world has been in a state of flux. Bachelor's and master's, when we combine those and look at what the trends are, we see really flat growth recently, 1 or 2% up. That's much more welcome than the decline we saw in prior years, but not enormous growth. And over the time period since 2019, we're approximately flat here. We're up 0.3% instead of down 0.3% at the associate level. What's going on inside that? What's hot and what's not? Business and finance are really our big area here. 4 programs make our top 10: finance, business analytics, marketing, and business administration. And then we have STEM making a very strong showing with cybersecurity, computer science, mechanical engineering, and data science in the top. And keep an eye as we go through this on the data science, business analytics. These are very hot areas, and you'll see it elsewhere in the data as well. And I'm a couple of healthcare here, allied health and psychology growing nicely.
Quick question for you, Bob, from the
Sure.
certificate slide. We have a question saying, do you think that the increase in general studies is influenced by free college in states like Rhode Island? And what will happen to that if it goes away?
A number like this isn't going to be hugely influenced by anything that happens in one state, though Massachusetts has begun offering free college as well, so it's not just Rhode Island. but that should be spread across most programs. I think this is more, again, it's a certificate too. So this is what it probably is people who are in an academic program, and the program has had the cleverness to say, I ought to be giving certificates so that people who might drop out have something to show for their time at the school. So oftentimes we don't really know why a number is what it is. We just know that it is. But that would be my guess of what's going on here is certificates are getting awarded to people as part of a program in general studies.
And a follow-up to that, Bob, what is the data telling us about the fact that there is a flat trend in bachelor and master's degrees when certificates and associates are higher?
It's actually very good news. Especially the associate's degrees, remember they're a pipeline to 4 years. So that as we see growth in the community college space, we're going to see a lot of those folks, I think it's 40, 50%, who will go on to apply to, the graduates at least will go on to apply to universities. So I see that as I say, a pipeline and a very good indicator for future demand for bachelor's degrees and beyond. You can't have bachelor's degrees, well, you can't start there, but there's an on-ramp, and you, of course, can't have master's without bachelor's. So as each underlying segment grows, you'd expect that to make a better future for the higher degrees. And if anybody disagrees, please chime in. Welcome your thoughts. I like to think I'm the sole source of truth, but people have told me that's not completely true. So if you have a different perspective, feel free to chime in. So let's talk about what's going on in new enrollment at the bachelor's level. And I hope I'm not repeating myself, but since I did go backwards, I have some risk. Finance at top of the list, sort of an interesting sign for our society that it would be the fastest growing new enrollment, with this whole focus on careers and pay. It's not surprising. It is one of the highest paid degrees out there. We have business analytics as well. I mentioned keep an eye on this. We're seeing a lot of growth there. And business administration grew too. I find this a little bit surprising because I believe a lot of demand for business administration degrees is getting cannibalized by business analytics. People perceive that this is a more differentiated degree and hotter in the job market. They probably have a point as well. So it's really remarkable that business administration has been this resilient when we have a program that could be taking students out of it that's growing as rapidly as business analytics. And marketing did very well with 4,800 incremental students enrolled over this period. We only have a couple: healthcare, allied health, and I mentioned psychology, and finally STEM. You've got the cybersecurity, computer science, mechanical engineering, and data science. It's our only engineering entry, which is interesting. And then data science, again, going back to the analytics, those are very closely related. A lot of interest there.
Another question for you, Bob.
Okay, just remember, if I get confused where I am on my presentation, it's not my fault.
What recent growth are we seeing in certificates in AI at the graduate and undergraduate levels?
Well, I don't know offhand, but interestingly enough, when it comes to new program enrollment, AI is making our top 10. And keep in mind, it's making our top 10 on unit growth, not percentage growth. So this was a very small program. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it make it if we were doing percentage growth. But now it's one of the, it's producing big numbers of incremental new enrollments at the master's level. And we're starting to see some growth at the associate. And I think it's true at the associate and bachelor's level as well. So this is, it's hard to say something's a good idea for everybody, but it's pretty much a good idea for everybody that if you haven't got an AI program, it's time to start. It has applicability across the curriculum, whether that's liberal arts, using AI to do preliminary research. I say preliminary because it does hallucinate. You have to check. But for things like history, gosh, you can interact with historical figures in an AI environment. And while it's not completely accurate, it's a wonderful learning experience, I think, for folks as a part of a course. But more broadly, people are interested in the subject and developing expertise at each level is different in terms of what you might want to be teaching, from prompt engineering at the low end, where anybody who can write in English, or for that matter any other language, can do prompt engineering, on up to high-level mathematics and PhD programs for folks who are really building the underlying large language models, for example. So I think there's lots of interest there, lots of legs, and lots of different ways to approach AI programs in higher ed. And yeah, I admit I've drunk this Kool-Aid completely, so I'm probably not objective about it anymore. And I will say that there are some significant issues as well that we shouldn't gloss over, however enthusiastic we are, whether it's privacy, security, and the over-engagement of individuals, especially younger people, with the technology that's led to some severe mental health issues. So all that has to be brought under control, I think, as you bring this into the college environment. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. Again, you can see this interest in business, high wage areas, business analytics, financial analytics. I mentioned watch analytics. Realistically, there's not that much difference between business analytics and data science. So we've got the number 1 and 2 programs in bachelor's at the master's level, with very similar kinds of curricula. We also have computer science, making it from a tech standpoint, as well as cybersecurity. This seems to be an evergreen program as well. Been growing for years. It's now very, very large, but still growing. Mental health, and we've got several healthcare: mental health, social work, physician assistant, and applied behavior analysis. I'm going to be interested to watch physician assistant over time. In our discussions with folks in healthcare, in particular a hospital chain I talked to recently, there seems to be an oversupply of nurse practitioners. They did not mention physician assistants, but they're very comparable kinds of roles. So I'm going to be curious to see if physician assistant ends up, if you will, overgraduating people as well. By the way, they absolutely needed nurses of every other stripe, but they said they had enough. They had enough people at the nurse practitioner level, which surprised me, frankly. I thought there was a shortage of all kinds of nurses. So it'll be interesting to track physician assistant over time. Still, as far as I know, from a job market perspective, very healthy program. Now, let's take a look at international. If you haven't been under a rock, and I'm guessing most of you have not, there's a problem in international. Essentially, the U.S. government declared war on this, and everybody around the world heard that cannon get fired. Interest in U.S. education has dropped 54% year over year. That is a startling number. Yes, this is a self-inflicted wound by the United States, and it's going to hurt us for decades, whether that's enrollment, which I hope will be a relatively near-term thing and will bounce back at some point in the next 5 years. But I think the damage is done. As folks don't come here, that's going to endure for a very long time. And folks will be more familiar with other cultures, other universities, and rebuilding our leadership position in higher ed for international students will take quite a long time. So where are these views coming from? Bangladesh is a leader. Honestly, if you ask me, where the hotspots are, I find much of this list very counterintuitive. Some are obvious. China, I actually would have expected to be number 1. And it may well be, this may be a little bit of an anomaly of our data source, but certainly a very large market historically. India, not surprising given its population and historical popularity of coming to the US for education. But I'm always surprised to see Nigeria here. And having done this for a while, there's one that's not on the list that used to be regular and actually a regular number 1, and that's Nepal. For some reason, it's dropped off out of the top 10. Now, I bring that up because if you're doing international, it's very important to have a good, robust portfolio of countries that you work with, because it changes constantly, whether that's because of our visa policies or domestic turmoil in a market like Nepal. A very productive market can go dark almost overnight. So keep that in mind. It's one of the reasons we publish this data, so you can see those trends and adjust your recruiting accordingly. You'll notice one thing on this page. We're now looking at the fastest growing programs at the bachelor's and master's level. And the first thing to notice is on the left-hand side of the page, the bars are going up. So there's an increase in demand for biology, psychology, linguistics, business administration, aircraft maintenance, health, allied health. These are very small growth down here. It's almost zero. And then there are a couple that declined: economics, mechanical engineering, and electrical engineering. Also notice that given the overall decline, we only have 7 programs that actually grew at all. After this, they're all declining. Now, I mentioned, notice the difference. On the right-hand side at the master's level, the fastest growing programs, in quotes, are declining, and they're declining by fairly large amounts. So these are the queens of the pigs, if you will, the programs that shrank the least. And they are mechanical engineering, environmental studies, kinesiology, psychology, nutrition, bioengineering, business analytics. Even with all the interest in that, it's declining on an international basis. Biology, economics, we saw that growing every place else, but not in international. Electrical and computer engineering. So pretty grim story at the master's level. There's still a sliver of sunlight at the bachelor's level. Now, let's shift and look at the job market. And keep in mind as we do this that there's some that it's a counterintuitive indicator. So as we look at the overall job market in the U.S., this is the same structure of the darker the bar, the further back it is. So 2025 is over here in the light blue. We're down 4% in job postings. And if you skip September and go backwards, you can see we've been down most months. In fact, year to date, we're down 8% from cumulatively through October. So on a year-over-year basis. So pretty substantial drop in job postings. There is one exception here in September. I'm continuing to dig through this. I think that's some sort of a data reporting error that we're trying to unravel. So I wouldn't take much comfort in the fact that this particular month went up. If it did, it'd be a surprise to me. But then I'm a pessimist, so I'm naturally surprised by good things. But we're checking it out. I just take that as an exception for now. We'll see how we do in November, December. But right now, October is a decline. So I said this is a negative indicator, if you will. What I mean by that is that there is a negative correlation between the growth in jobs and the enrollment in college. To be more precise, unemployment is a strong indicator of enrollment in college. When the unemployment rate goes up, enrollment goes up. When the unemployment rate goes down, enrollment in college goes down. So while many of you have heard about the demographic cliff, extraordinarily bad piece of research, but I won't dive into that too deep here, is a very weak indicator of the change in enrollment in college. 7% R squared, so it explains 7% of the change in enrollment. We back tested it by state and a bunch of other ways, and it really didn't hold up. And do keep in mind that it excluded international, and it excluded online and adult learners in particular, which has been it's about 30% of the U.S. market that just got left out of the analysis. So just not very good. And if you're trying to get a grip on what's likely to happen in your area, the things to look at are the inflation rate, Federal Reserve actions, and unemployment. And inflation is the longest lead indicator, and because there's a chain of things that happens when we have inflation. So when we have inflation, the Feds step in and they raise interest rates. When they raise interest rates, that drives unemployment up, and that drives people back to college. So the best long-term indicator I found, and it's not great, it's like 15-20% R squared. That is 3 times the demographic influence of people who were born 20 years ago. Is that unemployment rate, the inflation rate. And then again, you follow interest rates, and then you see unemployment. Unemployment's a pretty good indicator of what's going to happen over the next 12 months, again, up in that sort of 20% R squared range. So I'm encouraged for higher ed by this decline in job postings. I think we're going into a soft labor market buoyed primarily by investment in AI. and all the data centers going up. That accounts for 1 or more percent of the growth in the U.S. economy right now, which, by the way, is only running 1 or 2%. So it might be all of the growth in the economy is coming from investment in AI. So, as I say, right now, I think a weak economy is probably good for all of us. I don't like to root against the U.S. economy, by the way, but because it's not good for our society, but it might be healthy for higher ed. So what's growing out there? Well, software developers, this ought to be counterintuitive. We all knew software development was hot, but then we heard about AI, and I think we all thought, well, that's going to hammer software developers. Not so much, though I will say the rate of growth for software developers, as I looked at it, that's tapered off a little bit, but it's still going up. It's just not going up as fast as it used to. So still a good area. Number 1 in our list in terms of number of job postings by occupation. Another one of the more technical roles, industrial engineers, also up. Then we have business, making 4 slots here: payroll and timekeeping clerks, marketing managers, general and operations managers, and sales managers. And keep this operations manager idea in mind. When we go and look at what happens with skills, there's a really interesting switch in our economic data towards things that have to do with operations, the mechanical running of a business, and logistics. We also have a couple of healthcare that made it: physical therapists and nursing assistants. And then in our usual random entries, security guards and recreation workers. What are the skills? I mentioned operations, and 5 of our top 10 are related to the fundamental operations of a business or other enterprise: automation, operational excellence, safety standards, business operations, logistics. Very interesting, in terms of the change in the kinds of things we see from not away from software, but away from some of the other soft skills, or what's the way to say it, less operationally intensive businesses that have tended to lead in the US over the last 20 years, more the service businesses. We do see software doing very well: Python, computer science, cloud computing, and project management, which I included because much of this is management of software projects. And finally, analytics. This is a trend through all our data of increase in demand for people with strong analytical skills. So now let's take a look at one program, biology, and take a look at what people do with that degree. So if we look at job postings for biology majors, it's a variety of different spaces, much different than what you get if you, by the way, went and looked at the normal National Center for Education Statistics crosswalk of what you do with a bio degree. We do see a bunch actually of jobs for things that you would hope for: medical scientists. But, there's a really interesting array of things here: some teaching, zoologists, microbiologists, biochemists, agricultural and food science technicians, and life sciences. So those are the ones where you look at the job posting and you can associate it with having a degree in biology. But now let's look at it the other way around and say, I was a biology major. What did I go do for a living? Here we get a very different answer. Now, I think my analyst went overboard on this. And really picked a few people, everything that she could that wasn't much related to biology. But people who were biology majors go in some a whole bunch of different things. We've just picked 4. These are real people that we have in our database. We have a database of about 30 million people, what their undergraduate majors were, what they're doing now. We call our alumni database. One of these folks became a marine oiler. Someday I'll know what exactly that is, but I think they were tending to motors on a ship. Then they got closer to bio. They went into forest, insect, pest aid. And then they went a very different direction and went into social science and, within environmental services. So they were getting back home here towards the end, but really way out there at the beginning. Then we have somebody who decided they couldn't get a job or just didn't really want to go to work yet and became a bartender. Then they went and became a wildland firefighter. And finally, I think they're sort of decided they want to get serious, and they learned how to do software engineering. And you see again here, we're a little closer to home with a systems analyst. then software engineer, and finally, we have someone who started as a chemist, became a lab tech, and then did research. And here we have it. I look at it and say, okay, I understand this. It's linked to biology. I bring this up because very often in the analysis of academic programs, people assume that there's some very linear relationship between what I study and what I go do. That's just not true. And if you want to know what people really do, you have to do the analysis to understand what jobs they really go into. We spend a huge amount of time on this, looking through that database of 30 million people to see what folks with a history degree really do in their lives. We also look at the American Community Survey. Unfortunately, that's limited to bachelor's degrees in terms of what folks do. But again, we look at that and say, okay, if you had a bachelor's degree in one of these fields of study, then what do you do and how much money do you make? And that's there in the American Community Survey database, which is part of the US Census and 2.5 million responses. So there's some very good data out there about what people do. This is drawn from our alumni database. Be careful, though, when you look at data sources about this. Many of them are simply incorrect. They're using assumptions about what people do. In particular, the National Center for Education Statistics is the go-to crosswalk. Many labor data suppliers use it. And if I were looking at biology, they'd probably have 5 or 6 fields that folks with biology could go into, when in fact, as you can see, they go into all sorts of things. History majors, it's 5 or 6. And in fact, history majors go into, I think it's 490 different occupations, not 5 or 6. And the number one occupation history majors end up in is not on the NCES list, it's lawyer. Obviously, you have to go to grad school, but those simplistic analyses of the relationship between programs and jobs really do all of you a disservice, especially if you're in one of these fields where people go into all sorts of different professions. I think there's a great opportunity to do more effective marketing of those programs to parents and students who may perceive that there are no job opportunities for English majors or whatever. Just not true. And we have lots of data that you can share with them to show that people who major in almost anything can end up with a good job if they apply themselves. So what particular jobs does vary a lot by major, but it's not at all a linear relationship. And it's not what people think it is or out there in the world opining about, how we should all be studying to be engineers. Not helpful. I can tell you, you would never want to walk across a bridge that I engineered. So there has to be stuff for all of us, and there is. Now let's talk about what's going on specifically with business programs. And we're going to walk around the dimensions. I'm going to skip degree fit, but we'll talk about student demand, employment, and competitive intensity. First thing, if you're trying to evaluate programs, it's not just about whether a program is good, because you have lots of choices. We keep 1,500 programs in our database, and in theory, you could pick any one of those to launch at your institution. So if you're going to make that investment, it probably makes sense to make it in the best program you can launch. And I don't mean that just because the market's attractive. Obviously, it has to fit with your mission and so forth. But you don't want to go forward and launch a good program, and you could have launched something else that would have been more successful. It's too big an investment. But then you actually have to understand what all your choices are. And to do that, you need data on a lot of programs. And then you need to be able to get consistent criteria and score and rank them. So that's what we do inside our system. And you can see all 1,500 programs and how they score overall by student demand percentile, relative competitive intensity, and employment. You'll notice these are all percentiled. Why do we do that? When you look at raw scores, it's actually very difficult to interpret the numbers because it's, I just don't know how many Google searches, for example, are a lot in Toledo. It's going to be different than it is in Chicago. So we compare all 1,500 programs to each other and percentile them accordingly. So if it's at the 98th percentile, it's top 2%. That's going to be one of the top 30 programs in our data set for that particular criterion. Now let's take a look at one of them in particular. As I mentioned, we're going to look at business. Scores at the 98th percentile, very good student demand score, 99th percentile, a high, not so good on competitive intensity, and actually not so great on employment at the 88th percentile. Now, keep in mind, that's still a very good score, but what's really driving this to a degree is the high level of student demand for this particular program. So taking a look at student demand, we can see here again, we've got our percentiles, and we're looking at 7 metrics of student demand. One is Google search volume. The second is international page views. We see new student enrollment, probably the most reliable, deep data set here. This is 97% of the US covered in terms of enrollment. So, and it's very current. We update it every 3 months or so, 3 times a year, every semester. And then we have on-ground completions at in-market institutions. That's the folks who are going on campus within a given area. We have online completions by in-market students. And those folks, very important, may be coming from someplace else and completing in your market. Excuse me, the other way around. Students in your market who may be going to a school someplace else. Very important because you can often miss those competitors. You can't find that data in IPEDS, for example. And yet they may be very material players in your market. You just can't see them. And then we get some. So all these are at the 99th percentile or higher. There, as I mentioned, lots of demand for business programs. Not a surprise, biggest program in the United States. Google search volume change is up. New student enrollment, however, and completion volume over this time period is down. So we've got a little bit of a disjoint here between what people are looking for and how many people are actually enrolling and completing in this program. One way to think about this, especially if completions and new student enrollment are out of sync, completions is fairly old data for practical purposes. It's 2023 now. And it reflects what people were choosing when they picked programs 3 to 5 years before they graduated. So it's showing you what people were interested back in 2018, 2019. Still useful in terms of how big a program is, but when you're trying to understand student trends, pretty old. Enrollment, very current, most recently, including summer for 2025. So that'll give you a much better impression of what's happening right now. When those two numbers are in sync, it means, in this case, demand was down and continues to be down for this program, with a possible uptick coming as we look forward, Google being a forward-looking indicator. So it's, as I say, potentially looking better as we look forward. I apologize. My screen seems to have frozen for some reason. So now let's switch over and look at what the employment opportunities are for graduates in this program. Not surprisingly, there are a lot of jobs for folks graduating in business. It's a very general purpose program, and there are a lot of businesses out there that are interested in hiring them. All 3 of our metrics here, job postings, BLS total employment, and BLS's estimate of annual job postings, all to 99th or 100th percentile. One of the biggest, if not the biggest program in terms of entry-level jobs. I am a little surprised with the underemployed level here. 42% of graduates from these programs actually end up doing things that don't really require a college degree. I would say we have to be a little careful with that number always. What does and doesn't require a college degree is a little bit in the eye of the beholder. And there are often requirements in some businesses that you start off at the lowest level in the organization and even if you're in a management training program and then move your way up. So McDonald's requires you to start flipping burgers in a restaurant if you want a management job. Marriott does the same thing. So we do have to keep in mind that what looks underemployed may not be underemployed entirely. But nonetheless, since it's all comparative data, we can see that this is a little bit high, actually, at 66%, or the 66th percentile for underemployment. Entry-level jobs are growing. We're up 3.7%, 1 year, 4.4% over the last 3 years. So some persistent growth there. I'm going to skip down here and look at saturation. So this is how many jobs there are per graduate. And we've still got a healthy ratio for job postings at 1.9. And BLS job openings per graduate slipping below 1, which would be worrisome. But both those numbers are almost at the 90th percentile. So that's, doing very, very well compared to other academic programs. Pay, you're not going to be surprised to find that people make more than average at $57,000 for entry level. Post-entry median, though, we're starting to drift down towards the average here at 57%. So while there's a big bump at first with a business degree, some of that wears off over time. And if you will, the other graduates start to catch up. Last but not least, I'm going to point out direct prep. I mentioned people go into all sorts of things. Even business graduates, only 33% of them go into fields that are directly associated with their degree. Now, what do they do? Here are the top 10 occupations for people with a bachelor's in business administration. And these are their among their first four jobs after graduation. This is one of the dark secrets of the US economy, and I would guess every other economy around the world. Sales is the biggest occupation. And so it's interesting that there very rarely are programs that help prepare you for a sales job. But fortunately, most people can figure it out if they need to. So a lot of people end up in sales. That operations trend I mentioned, also very large. Financial managers, marketing managers, accountants, financial risk investment analysts, that's the finance guys we saw earlier, advertising and promotions, general managers, managers other, securities, and human resources. Highest paid here, not surprising, finance. All those people are interested, were taking that program, understood what they were doing. I was intrigued to see marketing is number two. But while none of us may aspire to a career in sales, also one of the higher paid areas. So pretty attractive place to end up if you're looking for money. So there are all kinds of other things about selling that people aren't as entertained by, but certainly a good way to make a living. Now let's take a look at competition and campuses with graduates. There's a score or a percentile to keep in mind. It gets a 0, the worst rating possible. And that's because damn near every campus in the country has a business program. So from a competitive standpoint, that's really not wonderful. Also worrisome, it has one of the highest levels, the way to describe this, highest number of campuses that dropped the program. So we're down 24 schools in terms of schools offering business programs, the highest number in our data set. So people are getting out of this program. That could also be colleges that are closing. And in market, also a very high number. Median completions is 28, so it's still a big program. But you'll notice over here, the unit change is down. So these programs are actually getting smaller, about 10% smaller on average. When I think about competitive intensity, when these two numbers are going negative, it really concerns me because that means people are in the market are having trouble filling their classrooms. Google search volume is expensive, 11th percentile, $16 a click. Keep in mind that that means you're going to multiply that by about 100 to understand what it costs to acquire a student. So getting very expensive at $1,600 per student enrolled. And that is a low estimate, actually, that the actual conversion rate from a click to a student could well be over 100x. Online, 708 institutions. That's also the highest number in the data set. And we've got 33% of all people in this field, completions, are getting them online. So if you haven't got accurate information online and you're doing business or offering a business program, you really need to have it to understand what's going on out there. And this is a one-page view of that data. I share this with you not because you're going to be able to assimilate it on this call, but we think it's very important to have it on one page so that the folks who need to evaluate programs have one place they can go. They can very quickly use the colors and percentiles to understand the attractiveness of a program. And when you get used to reading it, you can really move through it very quickly. You look at the dark greens, for example, to say, okay, those are my strengths. What do I have to worry about? Pretty quickly, you learn to look at red, yellow, and pink and say, what are the problems here? And you look at competition, and these are jumping out as a potential issue with the program. Not a surprise, huge program, everybody has it. Competition is intense. Now let's just switch gears, and I'm going to share some information with you about AI that we put together recently. I think I'm going to make this a regular part of the monthly meeting to not the specific points I'm making, but to highlight data that we have about AI and share that with you. It's too big a topic not to look at regularly. So one of the problems that we have in higher ed is that we're probably going to get stuck having to buy a general purpose model that people can use on campus. Why? Because it needs to be secure. And if faculty, administrators, or students are using public models that are not secured, there's a risk of all kinds of bad outcomes. Private and personal information getting out on the internet, institutional information getting embedded in models. And we're going to have to lock that down somehow. And ultimately, the way you have to do that is to offer a closed corporate version, is what I'll call it. It's what Google sells you their license, that is not being used. Your data is not being used to train the core language models. Well, that's very expensive. Per 1,000 students, my estimate is it's going to cost about $300,000, because we got about 100 for every 1,000 students. We have another 273 people, and it's $20 a month. So it gets to be real money. And there is no apparent financial benefit to that. It probably is required. You're not going to be able to get away without having this. People are going to expect it of an institution. But I think the financials of it are not going to be very attractive. However, when you get to more specialized models, it's a very different picture. So this is an example of an AI tutor. Typical human tutor in the RFPs we've looked at and the bid responses and so forth, it's around $22 per hour for a tutor. If you did that with AI, I think you'd be looking at costs that are down around $5 an hour and very likely lower as it goes forward. So huge reduction in cost. Also potentially, if it works a way of increasing student engagement, improving test scores. So you can get more for less, as I think, as we look forward. Now, this is not really a replacement for human tutors, I don't think. We're still going to need a place where students can go and talk to a person, partly for the psychological support they may need, but also there are many things a tutor might steer them towards that are not particularly about academics. They may recognize, for example, that the student's academic problem is actually a problem of food insecurity, and steer them towards the right resources at the university to get that help. Very hard to study if you haven't eaten. So this is one kind of tutor. It's very academically oriented, and that it can do. But it's, as I say, probably not a substitute for a human, but it allows you to extend academic tutoring much more broadly because it's much less expensive. And of course, it's available at 2 o'clock in the morning when students are doing their homework. If you think about the potential value creation from that, in our benchmarking database, about 11% of students get a grade of DF or W. And if we can reduce that by a point, about half of those students will drop out of school. And so we save about 25 students with a 1-point reduction in the DFW rate. That's a grade of DF or withdraw. So that's 25 students. At typical margins, again, coming from our benchmarking database, instructional margin, that saves about $261,000 a year. And most of those students are going to drop out at the end of freshman year or sooner. So in effect, you're giving up 3 years of margin when they drop out. So the benefit here is approaching $1 million, $785,000, if we can use tutoring to move that DFW rate down by a point. So there's no guarantee, but certainly the potential to significantly impact college financials, not to mention improve student outcomes here. Now let's turn to something like the Career Services Office. Again, you're always going to need some people in the Career Services Office, whether that's to handle a student who's upset or, importantly, to be out in the community talking to local employers and encourage them to hire your graduates. But for the more routine aspects of the job, AI is pretty darn good. And it could be done at a significantly lower cost than hiring another rep. So my perception, I'm totally biased because we do offer this, but I would very much look at it. If I have a job rec open for a career counselor, I'd think about replacing that person or staffing that with AI. It's about 50% as expensive, or 50% cheaper is a better way of saying it, just on its face. But then we look at the scope, the number of students that an AI career advisor could handle. I capped it at 1,000, but it's really unlimited. And if you look at it that way, I go from a $233 cost per student to about a $35 cost, an 85% reduction in cost per student. And again, it's available 24 hours a day, 150 languages. And obviously, if you're going to do this, the system itself has to be secure and private. So there are there are requirements here that are very material, but the economics are very compelling. And I think they've free career services up to a degree to be out in the community, talking to employers and stimulating demand for your students in the workplace. So as I say, I find the numbers here are just very compelling. And the actual quality of information that an AI can provide in many cases is better. The one we do, we actually have our labor market data underneath it. So it knows what people really do with the degree. And I don't think anybody can really understand, typical college with 100, 150 programs. Human can't really know what all those folks are going to go do. But the AI can keep track of what's really happening out there. So there's some real advantages to it, as well as cost. Last but not least, there's a communication skills gap. 96% of employers say that communications is the number one skill, but only 54% say that recent graduates have strong communication skills. But there's AI now that can do a video interview with you, role play a hiring manager, just as an example, or it could be patient-nurse interaction. Go through a role play. You can set up the personality, whether they're going to be polite or brusque. You can set up the scoring criteria for that engagement, and the AI will come back and give that person individual feedback on the effectiveness of their communication, whether that's the logical structure of their discussion or the clarity of speech and accent. So it's very remarkable what AI can do in this space. And that's private, so this person can rehearse as much as they want. If they choose to share a recording, an evaluation with someone else, they can do that. But that's something that they choose to do, and could be, for example, part of an assignment in the class. So really, just I couldn't believe what AI could do here, and that it was already at this point where it can look at you and give you coaching on your posture in a video interview. So that's out there too. So that's a little bit about AI and some of the benefits I think are out there. We do offer this stuff, but we also keep track of what others are doing and some of the opportunities. We call ours Coco. That's our little Coco person there. I hope some of you have signed up for the Coco stress balls. They're one of my favorites. Coco cheers me up. I have her on I don't know if it's a him or her, actually. I have them on my desktop, and hope that some of you get it and enjoy it as much as I do. Let me summarize. In October, Google searches for academic programs fell 29%. Economics withstood that better than anything else. It had the highest search volume and growth. And do keep in mind that that's probably not a sound indicator right now of overall demand for higher ed. I just think we're seeing a shift between the AI search and the traditional search that's driving that sharp drop off. In terms of new enrollment, it's generally flat over the last 5 years. General studies being the fastest growing at the certificate level. For associates, it was health, allied health in particular. At the bachelor's level, it was finance. At the master's level, business analytics. Throughout our data, you saw that trend towards analytics, data science, business analytics, very pervasive in the data. In the job data, I think we saw something very intriguing in the focus on operations, going, in different flavors of what I would call operations analysis and management. All of us have heard that demand for software developers is declining. It's not. It actually had the fastest growth in job postings. So that profession is alive and well. I always look at this and say, if you can find me a college or a business that hasn't got a 6-month backlog in IT, I'll be worried about job postings for folks with that experience. But I haven't found that institution yet. And we got a lot of backlog to work through before we don't need more coders. Demand for a bachelor's in business administration is strong. You saw the wages are above average, but it's very, very competitive. So many of you are, facing that competition right now. you really do need outstanding marketing to play in that space. And you've got some very large online players who are aggressive in this area. Keep in mind all the adjacent programs where there may be room to grow. For example, the business analytics program, so that as the business administration erodes, there are places you can go to find students, and many of the faculty requirements and so forth are going to be similar. So you probably have the staffing to engage in those spaces if business administration continues to be a bit under siege from a competitive standpoint. That's it for this month. Thank you all very much for joining. I'm going to stay on. If you have questions, please feel free, and be glad to take them.
Bob, can we also provide stress balls out to any of our clients that are out there if they just email us at info@graydi.us?
Anybody who wants a cocoa, just ask. We'll be glad to send it to you. I haven't decided yet whether I'm just going to use this on my desk as a stress ball, give it to one of my grandchildren, or if I had a dog, it might be a great chew toy as well. But I hope all of you keep it on your desk. It cheers me up.
As the marketing person here in Gray, please don't give it to your dog.
Yeah, I don't know if it's good for the dog's digestion now that you mention it.
Oh, we have a good question that just came up, Regan, if you want to share it.
Yeah, Bob. So someone asked, how can I prove to my colleagues that the enrollment cliff is not the singular driving force in enrollment management? And do we have a white paper on it?
I have a lot of data on that, and I believe I have a presentation as well. So feel free to send me an email. That is the last refuge of the incompetent, I believe, is the enrollment cliff. If your marketing guy is telling you the problem is the enrollment cliff, time to get a new marketing guy. That may be a little blunt for everybody, but it's just not true. Yeah, I do have that presentation now. Now I think about it. It's the Marianne. I'm happy to send you. I'll send you a presentation I did at the Midwest College Alliance about a year ago. But we spent 3 months trying to find a correlation between number of burrs 18 years prior and number of and the change in completions, and just very weak relationship. And it also made me understand something that I think for anybody who does statistics was probably obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me. And that is, it's very easy to predict the approximate total number of students who are going to complete college, because it actually doesn't change very much year to year, 1-2%. So I can take any large number, repeat it 10 times, compare it to enrollment, and I'm going to get a pretty good estimate of enrollment. Now you do that same thing and say, now predict the change in enrollment, and the numbers all fall apart. So part of the fallacy in that analysis was he was trying to predict total enrollment. And again, you could pretty much use any number and predict total enrollment. But once you try and predict change in enrollment, it all falls apart. And the actual correlation between birth and number of students is very limited. And when you think about it, it's not surprising. It's a very complicated phenomenon that has to do with social trends, demographic trends, certainly ethnicity, employment, as I mentioned. So it's just complicated. And, you know, I wanted to be able to build a model that would do a good prediction for an institution. And while I can tell you what the trends are, I didn't feel we could build one after months of work on it that would be accurate enough at a local level to be used by an institution to estimate its enrollment. So I don't know. That's my view. It's a difficult number to estimate. If I were trying to do it, I would go back again and pull high school and look at the trends in your high school population is probably a better indicator. It'll only take you out 4 years, but that could give you a much better handle on it. And what you want to watch there is not how many people are in school, but the percentage of those people who are going on to college. That's the issue, is the percentage of people graduating from high school that go to college has been coming down for 10 years. So that's where we're getting hit. And we're particularly getting hit with males. choosing not to go to college. So big issue there. Half the U.S. population, and the odds of them going to college is going down every year. All right. Thanks very much. And remember, despite all that gloom and doom at the end, enrollment's actually going up. So we're looking at a good period here, I think, for college. I think we're probably going to be fine for a couple of years.
And I'll go ahead and answer the question that just came up. Yes, we will send a link to both the recording and also all of the slides after the webinar.